Imagine, exactly 100 days have passed since the funeral. What is left of the body? What does it look like? And what happens inside the coffin, hidden underground? The answers will surprise you, because decomposition is not just rotting. It is a whole science. The first days. The start of the process. As soon as the heart stops, a chain reaction begins that cannot be stopped. Blood stops circulating, which means oxygen is no longer delivered to the cells. But the body does not disappear instantly. On the contrary, it begins to slowly and inexorably decompose, as if on schedule. The first act is autolysis, or self-digestion. This is when the cells begin to destroy themselves. Each organ, especially the brain and liver, literally dissolves from the inside because the enzymes normally involved in digestion are no longer controlled. They leave the cells and begin to eat the tissue. At first, the body looks almost normal. There is no terrible smell. The skin is still a pale gray shade. But inside, an invisible storm is already raging. Cells are dying, blood vessels are weakening, tissues are disintegrating. After 24 to 72 hours, bacteria begin to actively multiply, especially those that lived in the intestines during life. Without an immune system, they spread throughout the mushy, turning the insides into a field for microbial activity. The gaseous byproducts of these bacteria accumulate and cause bloating, especially in the abdominal area. It can swell to such an extent that it seems larger than in life. The skin begins to stretch, and dark veins appear under it. Traces of collapsing blood vessels and gas breaking through to the outside. From the outside, the body may still look calm, but inside it is already a chemical and biological hell. All this in just the first 3 to 5 days. And this is just the beginning. Weeks later, bloating and gases. If in the first days everything happened quietly and secretly, now the body enters the most obvious and ominous phase, active decay. Already on the 3rd, 7th day, the bacteria that lived in the intestines during life begin to rapidly take over the entire body. Without immune protection, no one can stop them. They eat tissue, destroying cells and releasing toxic gases in the process. Methane, ammonia, hydrogen sulfide. These gases accumulate inside the body, creating enormous internal pressure. The stomach swells, the face becomes swollen, the features are distorted beyond recognition. Sometimes the skin even bursts, releasing foul-smelling gases outward. The skin color changes especially sharply. First, it darkens, acquiring a greenish, then a crimson-black hue, the result of the breakdown of blood and tissue. The eyes become cloudy and can be squeezed outward due to internal pressure. Fluids begin to separate: pus, blood, tissue, moisture. They can flow out through the mouth and nose, sometimes even through the pores. This is not just unpleasant. In the old days, such signs were considered a manifestation of a curse or possession because the body seemed alive and frighteningly mobile. The smell at this stage is almost impossible to describe in words. It is a mixture of rotten meat, chemical fumes, and rotting tissue, so pungent that even professionals working with bodies sometimes lose consciousness. By this time, the coffin is no longer a hermetic box. The pressure from the inside can push the lid out, especially if the body is in a warm and humid environment. But the worst is yet to come when the bones and tendons begin to decompose. And this is the next stage, day 30, 50, the beginning of tissue destruction. About a month has passed. During this period, the body begins to lose its human form. Everything that was still holding on begins to fall off, shift, and disintegrate. The skin peels off like an old film. This is especially noticeable on the hands and feet. It can slide off in whole pieces, revealing muscles and then bones. The color becomes ash gray or dark green. Soft tissues, muscles, fat, connective tissue begin to rapidly deteriorate. The face loses features, cheeks sink in, the tongue deteriorates, the eyes dry out completely or disappear. Sometimes it seems that the nails and hair have grown. This is a frightening visual deception. In fact, the skin dries out and retreats, revealing more nail roots and hair follicles. This is why the body looks especially frightening, like a living creature with long claws and hair. If the coffin is not hermetically sealed, or the body was buried without proper protection, insects, especially flies, come into play. They lay eggs in orifices, eyes, mouth, naso, mouth, nose. From them emerge larvae that quickly turn flesh into mush. These tiny creatures eat tissue faster than any chemical reaction. But even in a sealed coffin, without access to oxygen and insects, the process continues, only more slowly and with different effects. Instead of actively destroying the life from the outside, internal fermentation begins, tissue fluid seeps into the lining of the coffin, and everything turns into a slowly rotting organic mass. By this point, the body is already unrecognizable. This is the border between a person and his complete biological degradation. But the most frightening changes occur after 60 to 100 days, when decay reaches the very depths of the body. 100th day. What remains? A little more than 3 months have passed since death. During this time, the body has gone through a series of frightening transformations. But now comes the next phase, stabilization of decomposition. Soft tissues almost disappear. The face is no longer a face, but an empty, deformed shell. The chest is exposed. The stomach collapses. The limbs become thin, dehydrated. The muscles have disintegrated, and what used to hold the body in anatomical shape has turned into a loose mass. Fat tissue, especially in the abdomen, thighs, and buttocks, begins to turn into adipocire, known as corpse wax. This waxy substance resembles fatty soap, pale, dense, with a characteristic odor. The organs have almost disappeared. The liver, lungs, heart, all of this dissolves into mushy biomass. Only the denser parts, such as the kidneys or spleen, may still remain, but not as organs, but as blurred silhouettes. If the body was embalmed, it may look almost whole on the outside. The skin will retain its shape, the face, its features. But inside, inevitable decay. Organs dry out, tissues lose their structure, fluids evaporate. Embalming is only a delay, not a protection. The smell also changes. In the early stages of decomposition, it is sharp, aggressive, almost unbearable. By day 100, the gases have already escaped, and now there remains a faint, musty aroma of decay. It can only be felt if the coffin is opened or an exhumation is carried out. Sometimes in this phase, the body begins to partially mummify, especially if it is in a dry and hermetic space. The skin tightens, becomes like parchment. The fingers and skull are deformed. This is especially noticeable in those who were buried in metal coffins without access to oxygen. On the 100th day, the human disappears. The remains of the body no longer resemble what it was. It is no longer a person, but a trace, a biological shell, slowly disappearing underground. But even now, the process is not yet complete. The remains can be preserved for decades, and under special conditions, for centuries. Why they don't tell about it in school. The topic of decomposition is like a shadow that people try to ignore. Biology textbooks rarely mention what happens to the body after death. Instead, there is silence, or dry, impersonal terms hidden between the lines. Why is that? Because decomposition is taboo. We are afraid of death, afraid to talk about what it does to our bodies. We distance ourselves to maintain the illusion of control. But the truth is that post-mortem biology is not darkness, but science. It is an honest, impartial look at what is inevitable for every person. It may seem dark or frightening, but it is this knowledge that helps us accept death, not as an enemy, but as part of a larger cycle of life. Finale, 100 days, a mark on the body of time, 100 days after the last breath. The whole life of the body, after the life of consciousness. At this point, a person ceases to be a body and becomes nature. The organism that once thought, felt, loved, now dissolves into the earth, leaving behind only a trace. We do not like to talk about it, but the more we know, the less fear and more respect for the body, for life, for the very fact of our existence. After all, death is not the end. It is just another form of movement. 100 days is not just a date on the calendar. It is a stage in an invisible but natural process that awaits everyone. And the more we know about it, the less fear there is in it, and more respect for life.